Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Finance Standards Guide session for the EB Academy. So, today I will be walking you through the finance standards for finance, so you're aware of which topics are covered within the finance standards framework. And we will, of course, also look at which changes have been made. And afterwards, we'll look at what you as an LC can do for this finance standards implementation. This presentation has been provided by AI, so I'll be walking you through it. And normally this is the one that is shared with MCVPs, but I think that there are topics covered here which are also important for you to know as LCVP Finance. So without further ado, let's start. And we will firstly, I will explain to you what is the difference between the evolved finance standards and the former finance standards. So the finance standards have been created to make sure we have 100% financially sustainable and legal ISAC. So that also means that it's up to us to make sure that we get these to 100. And yes, so my friend Roland, who is currently in AI, has worked on the evolved finance standards. And this is because we realized that the finance standards were incomplete towards all of the things that had to be implemented in every entity. So they added stuff and they made sure that it now encompasses everything that it needs to encompass. An important thing to see here is that finance standards are really the minimum of the minimum what every entity must do, and therefore it is not a question how are we aspiring to get 100%, but we need to make sure that we reach this 100%. And even though it's difficult at times, especially for the sustainability standards, in which we will get into in a bit, we still need to work for it, and it should be number one priority of the financiers in the entity. So, what is it now exactly? Why are we doing this? Like I already mentioned before, is to ensure that we, ISAC, are 100% legal and sustainable on our operations at all levels. So this means that we need to align quality throughout different realities in different countries. It makes it easier for us to educate people and to collect data because it's about full alignment. It's to ensure legality, protection of the organization, and protection of the customer as well, to consolidate data. So not just that we can collect data from all entities, but also to put it all together and get a quick view on that. To set expectations, especially with our operational areas, and like I already said a couple of times, to ensure financial and legal sustainability of our organization. Now, the finance standards are a big part of one of the 5 strategy lines for ISAC 2020, which is called Organizational Legality and Financial Sustainability. So, as it is one of the 5 strategy lines, it is viewed as extremely important to our organization, also from the international level. And therefore, I think it's important that you also get full education on what it means and how you can work on it. Yes. So in total, there are 6 finance standards: legality, accounting, reporting, budgeting, auditing, and sustainability. Most of them explain what they mean by the name itself, but some of them are a little bit more broad, and therefore we will go through all of them for you to understand what they specifically mean. And yeah. So why are finance standards so important? And to explain it, they put the finance standards on a timeline, right? And this is with implementation. Currently, we're at year 4. So by the end of, we've started year 4, year 5. So at the end of this, we want to reach sustainability at its fullest level. And I can already tell you that in ISAC and Austria, we still have quite some steps to make. So it all starts with legalities. Legalities is the very first beginning because you need to make sure that your entity is legal to do operations. If the government or the police shuts it down, then it doesn't matter what you did in all the other areas, but it's still important that then you still cannot operate. The second thing is budgeting, accounting, and reporting. To start off with budgeting, it means that you create a financial plan for the year and that you understand how this financial plan will affect your organization at multiple times during the year. Secondly, accounting. And accounting basically means that we record all data that we get from the financial aspect in the correct way. So, as I already explained in the previous session, accounting is a very big part of the finance standards. And I explained there how you can do everything properly. But throughout this session, we will go a little bit more into what does it mean specifically next to just the operational side of it. And lastly, for this part, you can see reporting, because we need to gather insights on what we are actually doing in our budgeting, realizing, and accounting, for us to gain insights on how our operations are going and what are things that we may need to change to make sure that we will not run into future problems, or to see where is room for us to do more or do better things. The fifth finance standards that you can see here is auditing, and they're represented here in annual audits. But audits basically mean that it is not just budgeted, accounted, and reported for, it is also checked upon. Because it's very easy for financiers to make unethical choices or make mistakes, which is the most common thing. And therefore, we need to check whether it's correct and whether the data is represented properly, and how can we improve for the next times to make sure that these audits are getting to a higher level of financial representation. And the last one is sustainability. Now, sustainability is not just a one-year thing. Sustainability is something that you build up. So whereas it is very possible that some of the products that we're running right now are not sustainable, we need to ensure that we think of a longer term plan to make every single product in the entity sustainable. Cool. So quick overview of the finance standards, why are they important, and how do they look on a timeline? Now, let's go to the first finance standards, legalities. So what does it mean to be legal in the broader form? It means operating and behaving according to the national law. So this means having the right working permits, having the right visas, making sure that wherever we need to pay taxes, that we pay our taxes, that you report to the fiscal authorities, that you sign your contracts, and that your contracts can also be viewed by exchange partners and EPs, so that they know what they signed and whether it's actually the correct framework. Secondly, it's according and behaving according to the global compendium. So also within ISAC, as we have our local compendia, our national compendia, we also have our global compendium. And this global compendium makes sure that we stick to the rules that we have set with each other. The third one is establishing internal governance and following it. So here's where the national compendium comes into place, but also to make sure that we have an internal control framework, which makes sure that every agreement that we've set with each other is behaved accordingly to. And fourth, we need to ensure that we have external legal advice to protect our entity and our brand. So we don't know that much about legalities as an organization, because we're still a youth-run organization, and therefore it's smart to make sure that we have this external help as well. Well, here on the side you can see, let's be honest, and it talks about demonstrating integrity. And I truly believe that demonstrating integrity comes back with doing legal, because if we do not act accordingly internally to what we say we will do, so literally the entire legal framework, then how can we say that we as an organization are demonstrating this integrity and that we are a valued partner for EPs and our partner organizations? Sorry for keep turning back. I keep pressing the wrong button. Yeah, so why? A legal organization ensures its brand name and reputation. ISAC is a similar organization, needs to ensure legal profile as well. And considering the products and the issues we cater, we cannot take risks of sending our exchange participants illegally. Some of the points that you can see in here are, for example, having a compendium and constitution, having a legal representative inside the MC, global membership criteria, entity membership criteria, legal registration for MCs and LCs, tax status is defined and paid, trademark registration, exchange contracts, PD and sponsorship contracts, visa for customers, visa for international MC members, professional legal advice, and that the risk and legal matrix is fulfilled. So I will go a little bit into each of them for you to understand what they all mean. But I read just now a message that someone cannot get in, so I will quickly share the link. Cool. Now let's continue. Yes, so you can see here that it's a legality checklist for the MCVP Finance, but I still want you to understand each of the points. And I will go more in depth on the points that are more relevant for LCs. So compendium and constitution. This means that we need to make sure that we are fulfilling our external law as well as our internal law to follow the ISAC Global Compendium, and also to make sure that our national plenary is working towards it. Legal representative inside the MC, and that means that we have an end responsible for legalities. Global membership criteria. MC will ensure that national compendium is aligned to the global membership criteria. So for that, you don't need to worry, but you need to make sure that whenever the MC communicates stuff about global membership, that we should make sure that we work on it as well. Entity membership criteria. So these are also in the, I will not explain right now, you will see it later, but these are also in our own finance standards checklist, and I will explain where they come back. Then legal registration for your entity. You need to make sure that every year you update your ZVR registration to make sure that there's always EB who is elected legally registered for the ISAC entity as well. Then we don't have a tax status, so for us this is not important right now, but it means that if we would have to pay taxes, that we do this in the right format and to the right authorities. And yeah, trademark registration is also not important for you. However, this does mean that you cannot use or deform the ISAC logo, because if you will, then it means that it is not the official ISAC logo and we cannot work with it. Exchange contracts. Now, this is an extremely important one, and I want you all to take the time and read the exchange contracts that we have. But for every part of our every product that we offer to customers, we have a different contract. And every contract as well needs to be signed in the proper way and on the proper timeline. If we do not have exchange contracts for EPs, for example, or companies, and the companies start a lawsuit against ISAC, we have lost already, because everything that is stated in the contract is also what protects us as an organization to make sure that we deliver what we promise upon. Whenever your LC starts sponsorships, make sure that you do not just create a contract and let it be signed, but make sure that it is checked by me and the legal coordinator, Roxana Bota, so that we are 100% sure that you're also protected by the contract. For example, I know that for a very long time, and it still happens, that we do not have contracts for IGV. Now, if you do not have contracts for IGV, basically you can already expect not to get any money that you agreed upon. And as IGV is an extremely difficult product to keep sustainable, it's also an extremely important product to keep legally done well. So make sure that you read the exchange contract to see if everything is included. And as soon as everything is included, then you can send it. The exchange contracts can currently be found on the knowledge database. So only use the latest version. In case of doubt, always contact the responsible MCVP. So for ICX, that would be Karina, and for OGX, that would be Mao. Make sure you contact them and ask them, hey, is this the right contract? If it is, then you can use it. Make sure that you also have visas for your customers, and make sure that they are stored somewhere, because we need to be 100% sure that if people ask for it, that we can show it. The other 2 points are less important for LCs. If you need legal advice, always contact me or Roxana Bota first, and we will ensure that you will get the legal advice that is needed. What we see happening a lot is that people are asking for legal advice for things that we already know. As legal advice is extremely expensive, it is not a smart idea to just contact a lawyer. Yes, the risk and legal matrix is fulfilled. So here you can find different points that you need to have as an organization to make sure that we are not running any risks. So first of all, insurance. Make sure that all EPs and trainees have insurance. This is also in the exchange standards. Warzone is luckily at the moment not a case in Austria. Trademark domain, not a problem. GDPR, however, is a very, very important one. We created the full GDPR framework, and as an entity, we are the first one to fully create this, and we will start implementation from the 1st of February onwards. You will get more information on GDPR later. Make sure your organization has a bank account. Make sure that not just the global fees are paid, but that you also pay to the MC so that we can pay our global fees. And lastly, that there is an entity control board in place. At the moment, we do not have an entity control board in place, but we will take care of this as soon as possible. Now to the second finance standard, which is accounting. Now, accounting, like I already said in the previous video as well, it is a process of collecting, recording, classifying, interpreting, and communicating financial information. It reveals profit and loss for a given period and the value and nature of an organization's assets, liabilities, and equity. It shows overall wealth, profitability, and liquidity, and it shows the resources available, how those resources are financed, and how the results achieved through using them. Accounting is really about making sure that we record all the financial data in the correct way. And on the right side, it says it as well, the law is the law. You are obliged to do accounting as an organization. If not, you are already breaking the law. So for example, we need to store all our financial documents for at least 7 years. And I would suggest that you keep these also physically, so you can also easily move towards it. This is all included in the auditing guidelines as well. So don't worry about that, but make sure that you always keep your accounting up to date and that you also keep your financial documents stored. So going into the different points, double entry bookkeeping system with our Wave, we have that. Following the accounting principles, I will explain to you the accounting principles, not here in this session, most likely not even in one of the EB Academy sessions, but we will go into this in our commission calls to make sure that everyone understands what the accounting principles are. Alignment between accounting and budget. If you follow the reporting system that I created, then that is taken care of. But it is very important that we align our accounting and budget. Otherwise, you may not be representing things in your financial plan or your reporting, and therefore may be showing numbers which are completely irrelevant. Financial statements, which are balance sheets, profit and loss statement, and a cash flow statement, should be generated at least once per year. However, we do this on a monthly basis. And yeah, it is very important that we store all this data so also our successors can follow up on this data in next years. Next, the requirements of accounting documents, documents which prove accounting transactions. For every transaction that you do, you need to have a bill or a receipt. If you do not have this, the whole transaction can be counted invalid because you simply have no proof that this was actually that you are paying for. And therefore, we have certain processes like reimbursement forms, Sonderbilligen, which I would suggest LCs not to use because it's unnecessary. But make sure that you always have a document to back up why you have a certain transaction. Then next, archive all accounting documents physically and or virtually. Like I already explained, I would like everyone to keep them physically for 7 years to make sure that we are legally covered. And align your chart of accounts with the GFB list of accounts. This has already been done, and it basically explains how every account is linked to the one the Global Finance Board is using. But for you at the moment, this is not something to worry, but we're going to change when we're working with the new reporting system. I will explain to you how each of them links to the Global Finance Board list of accounts. Now going into the accounting checklist for MCVB Finance. Again, I will go through it, but only for the ones that are important for you and that you need to know something about, which are the accounting principles. So quickly to go through them, and I would like you to read them as well, not at this moment, but at a later moment. The accrual principle. This means that the transactions that you have should always be recorded in the period in which they actually occur and not in the period a cash flow happens. Take, for example, if you're organizing a conference as an LC and the conference falls in October, but in September you have costs, and in September you also get some revenues for it. Then in November you get some revenues for it. They all need to be all need to be recorded in October, and you need, for example, when you have your audit, when people check that you have a stamp on the form which says recorded in October, because October is the proper month. This is when the conference happened, so they should link to there. Consistency principle means that when you're doing something in accounting, you need to do the same thing for future periods, and you cannot just change them on a very consistent basis. You can change them, but then you need to be consistent again. Take, for example, the fact that we've changed the chart of accounts now. You cannot just add new accounts and leave the ones there. No, you need to change the names of previous accounts because transactions have already been recorded in there. Thirdly, the cost principle. The cost principles, it means that if you buy something, that the asset should be recorded at the time that an asset is acquired. So take, for example, you buy a printer. You cannot just say, I'm going to buy this printer in 6 terms of payments. No, you need to take the full payment at once, and then later you can start to make that amount less, because also the asset becomes less. Then the economic entity principle. Very simply said, you cannot use the Isaac bank account for personal transactions. You always need to make sure that every transaction that you do belongs to the organization, and therefore you need to keep them separate from your personal transactions. Next is the full disclosure principle, and this means that it is not okay to show reports without missing information. All information that affects the understanding of the statements should be there. So if, for example, it seems like in your report that you made a super high profit in a certain time period, and for the month you're going to say like, oh my god, we made so much money in this month, but actually the money was just supposed to be made 1 month later. That means that you also have to disclose the fact that your revenue stream was earlier than expected, and therefore in next month you will see less of a revenue stream. This is especially a problem between terms, because often we think that if costs were made in previous terms and we pay for it, that affects our financial statements. However, it just means that your predecessor did not do a good job in explaining that this money will have to be paid for the goal. And the going principle that you should always have the amount of assets necessary to cover for your liabilities in the future. So you will always expect the organization to keep existing. There is no reason for you to stop like being an LC, so to say. And therefore you need to also make sure that if you see future costs coming up, that you make sure that you have the right amount of assets for to reach these future costs still and to be able to cover for them. Accounting principles, then the next part. Then monetary unit principle mean that you can only record transaction that can be exposed in a term of currency. So, for example, as Isaac, we cannot put goodwill on our accounting because we cannot say how much it is actually worth. Reliability principle means that you can only record transactions that have a supporting accounting document. Then the revenue and cost recognition principle means that you recognize the revenues and costs in the period that they're earned or spent, and not in the period when the cash is collected. So this one is super similar to the accrual principle. However, the difference is that the accrual principle is about all transactions that you're making, and the revenue and cost recognition principle is about when are you recognizing revenues or costs. Then the time period principle means that you should report the financial result of its activities over a standard period of time. So not that you can do it, or you should do it either monthly, quarterly, or annually. What is for this one, also mentioned in the previous video, if we the accounting software and budgets should always be aligned, so you cannot just add or keep new accounts. We need to make sure that everyone is using the same one. And then you have the 3 statements, which should be generated at least once per year. However, we are recording them on a monthly basis, and I will explain to you in a personal way how you can generate them, although I mostly explained it already in the previous video. And yes, already explained as well, you need to have the requirements of accounting documents, so the documents that prove accounting transactions. And lastly, keep them. So here it says no less than 5 years, but according to Austrian law, we need to keep them for at least 7 years. Now, next is reporting. What is reporting? Reporting means that we are showing to our internal and external stakeholders that how we did financially. So it's providing organized information in the form of a document. Financial reporting refers mainly to external financial statements, the ones that already were mentioned before, and on what basis are we reporting to the National Plenary and AI. Things that we need to be doing here is monthly reporting of executed budgeted for incomes and expenses. Also, this is included in our own finance standards checklist. Reporting process of budget execution. So that means that you need to also have the total amount difference between your budget and expenses. Our report includes structure of GFP, which we already have, storing the reports physically and or virtually, for which we have the knowledge database. However, I don't think we're right now storing them properly, and I will explain to you in our commission call how we will be storing these reports. And the GFP survey is submitted monthly. Currently, I'm responsible for this, but I would like to involve the commission more into the GFP survey, and I will explain that to you once the time is there. Yes, here, make sure that you report to your LCEB monthly about the financial situation, and also that you report to the MC monthly on budget execution. that you report to your local plenary at least every quarter, and that MC reports to national plenary also every quarter. And yes, then the next point is about the GFB structure, which we already have. And like we already mentioned a couple of times, we want to store reports physically and or virtually. I think virtually here is better, for at least every 5 years. Next thing is budgeting. Budgeting is basically a tool to assess your performance. And it is just as all operations are setting their goals, the budget is a numeric translation of our action plan. So it is basically the same, but then in terms of financial goals. Normally, we're a bit more conservative when it comes to financial budgeting than when it comes to numerical planning, but still it is how we are planning to do financially in terms of our operations. Now, something that I want you guys to know that is extremely important here is that the budget is not just something that you are responsible for. In the end, your whole LCEB needs to feel responsible for their budget and they're part of the budget, and therefore also feel that they take ownership for their financial goals. Yes, I'm not going to go through all of them because I don't think it makes a lot of sense for this one. But we make sure that you have a budget before your terms start, that they are planned in profit, that you're able to translate your budget goals into exchange goals for your LCVPs. And that we also do a forecasting of the budget. So what do we think that our yearly results will be if we follow the current budget? And that, for example, if you're organizing conferences or Youth Speak Forum or other events, that you have a separate budget for that. Yes, that is important for here. Again, I just explained them shortly, and I will not go more into depth because we will be spending quite some time during TACO on this, and also during our commission calls until the 1st of February. Next point is auditing. For you to know, every LC needs to have 2 auditors, who are 2 people who are not part of your current EB or membership. And membership, I mean your local membership, who are checking how you are actually doing in terms of accounting and budgeting and reporting and realizing for all your financial aspects. So this is about transparency and making sure that you did not make mistakes or did any unethical things in your accounting processes. Here we need to have 3 things. For LCs, this is a little bit different. So we will focus on the financial internal audit and the legal internal audit. So for the legal internal audit, you need to have, we will start doing this from the 1st of February as well. We will have a quarterly audit for LCs that will see if they are behaving according to finance standards, according to the GDPR framework, but also according to whether you have the right visas, whether you have stored all the contracts in the right form, in the right place, basically making sure that all the legal documents that were mentioned before, that they are there and that they are correct. Then next, for the financial internal audit, this is where we will audit all the documentation for your finances. So this means budget execution, your income and expenses, and whether they were according to budget, whether you have financial documents proving all transactions, whether they are in the right way, whether you send the invoices to the right people at the right time, whether they were paid, etc., etc. There is way more to be told about the audit, so I'm also going to keep it brief here. However, this is done on a quarterly basis, and basically people check whether you did your job as LCVP Finance correct. And now comes the most difficult one, which is sustainability. And sustainability is you often think about like the sustainability of in terms of either growth or of um, the environment, but here it really means that we manage our financial processes in a way that our people and profit can be positive in the future. And that sounds very vague, so I will go more in depth on it. Here you see all different sustainability levels and financial indicators. And basically, for all of them, we have a minimum amount that needs to be there to make sure that we are covering for our internal costs in a way that we do not lose any money out of the organization. So here, I will go into the 5 substandards for the sustainability standard. And the first one is entity sustainability. Very simply said, as an MC, our profit of products should be higher than direct plus indirect costs. And the same for the LC. A little bit of a difference is here that MC is allowed to have a certain amount of money coming from partnerships because we are not doing direct exchange. But for LCs, at least 70%, for LCs, your profit of your product. So if you would take all the exchange products together and the revenue that you're getting from there should not just be able to cover for its direct costs, which can be promotional costs or accommodation costs or whatever. They should also be able to cover for your indirect costs. I shortly explained this in the last video as well, but your products need to cover both. And then the entity sustainability means that MC and LC both altogether have run in a profit. Next point is product sustainability, which is similar to the entity sustainability, but I'm going to show you in an example a little bit better how it actually works. The example will come in a bit. HR sustainability is all about team standards implementation and education cycle for LCVP Finance, which comes from the MC. However, this comes from the MC because LCVP's Finance do not have teams in our entity. And then the other financial indicators, you will also have a realization tool which will show you these, but our months of financial reserves are optimal when they are 6. And this means that if you would not generate any money for 6 months, you would still be able to cover for all the costs. And we calculate these in the way that we calculate these with the average of the cost of the previous 12 months. So, for example, if you have enough equity to cover for 6 of these 12 past months, then you're in the optimal situation. Then liquidity. Liquidity means that your money that is easily available, like that you actually have, so your cash, which is your bank account plus petty cash, can cover for at least 1 times your liabilities. And the optimal number here is 1.3. Then core performance for LCs and MCs. This means that we get 70% of our total income from exchange. So also sponsorships can only be valid for this if they are actually directly linked to one of the parts of exchange. Then the debt ratio means that we can only have 50% of our liabilities covered from our total assets. So you can also see here the calculation for that. Yes, then direct costs over total costs. There's not an ideal ratio, but preferably we would have 65% of all our costs to be direct costs. And the next point is that all conferences are sustainable. And still we see that many of our conferences are running in a loss. So we also need to make sure that we are budgeting properly for our conferences and make sure that they are not running in a loss. Yes, the risk management sustainability. So this means that the legal risk management is fulfilled, and that you check every quarter what is the probability of a risk happening and what would the impact be, and that we are also taking action steps to mitigate, avoid, transfer, or ignore the risks that are there. And this is also why in our finance standards there's a risk log that we have to look at. Yes, so I just will show you now the sorry, I lost my word. I will show you now our finance standards checklist, and you can find these at stamina.isaac.at. So you can always check yourself here as well. What does our finance standards checklist look like, and how am I fulfilling these? But I will quickly walk you through the tool. Let me see. Okay. Yes, here it is. So for the finance standards checklist, I'm just going to show you an example of September because it's filled in. And now don't look at the line which explains what are the tasks, because the tasks have changed a little bit. I will just quickly show you how it works. So first of all, we can see here the priority of the task. And this is something that we created with the commission according to how important is it that this one is fulfilled. Then if it is fulfilled, you get a 1. If it is not fulfilled, you get a 0. And according to the percentage of importance and the amount that you have fulfilled here, you will see a final amount here for a specific finance standard. So here you see the one for legalities, here you see the ones for accounting, here you see the ones for budgeting, reporting, auditing, and sustainability, right? You can see that there are multiple factors that influence them. And then in total, you can see the average of all these. So how important were these finance standards and what is the average of them? As you can see, we have some LCs who are still on the lower end, but we also have some LCs which are quite high and are aspiring to get to 100%. Now, I will show you what the list for us will look like. Yes, it's here. So this is how we will start working with ours as well. And it means that first of all, for legalities, and you can also see them back in the normal list, that the contracts tracker is updated with the newest contracts, that the contracts are in valid form, that we have a general assembly taking place quarterly, that basic agenda points are in compendium, and basic agenda points which are defined in compendiums are in GA, that compendium is uploaded and available for GA and to the network, that you have the ZVR uploaded, and that there are legal representatives from the EB there, and that the visa tracker is updated and the risk and matrix is uploaded and presented to the EB. For accounting, this is all about the way we show our reports, and these need to be sent in before the 10th of the month. Then for budgeting, you can see here that the legislated budget of the term needs to be uploaded by the 1st of February, so right before your term starts. That there's a quarterly replanned budget for which I will also assist you, and that the budget that you're reporting onto the national plenary is actually the same as the legislated budget. Otherwise, you're changing your data inputs for the sake of making it look better. For reporting, that you have monthly review of standards to the EB, so the finance standards review, that you have a quarterly report to the GA, which is your performance plan and financial plan, which is also part of your budget and realization, and then that we have a finance report to the commission quarterly. For auditing, it means that you have a limited or positive audit, and now sustainability, which is the most interesting one because there were a lot and now there are only few, because most of them were relating to HR. Now, Gizai will take over this part with her TM commission, and therefore they will not be in here anymore, but we will focus more on the financial indicators. And right now, it will focus on the positive second level of exchange sustainability of the last 12 months, so that your products are able to cover for its direct and indirect costs for if you would look back at the last 12 months. Other things that also will be put in here is entity sustainability and financial indicators. So now you know where you can find them. Oh, I see. I forgot one. Yes, that there are more than 1,000 euros in reserves on a separate account. We will measure this one, but we will also start measuring the months of financial reserves, for which you need to have more than this. But the weight for this one will be important, because this is really a small amount of money that you need to have on your reserves for the sake when something goes completely wrong, that you at least know how to cover for it for some money. So now you know where you can find them. What I do towards the end of the month, I send a list in our commission channel, which will explain to you the checklist of what needs to happen of these finance standards for the next month. And then you know where you need to work on. So if you're already in the commission, then you can find these as well online in Slack. And with this list, we can you can check what the things are that you need to complete for the next month. And yes, from my side, that was it for this webinar. If there are any questions, feel free to approach me and I will explain to you how it works. And I hope I will see you in 13 minutes for the next session, which will be about financial synergies. So have a great evening and hope to see you soon. Bye-bye.